Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Purple Noon, a podcast. I am Stephanie Conti, and I am here with the Mr. Chow to my Sue, Savanna Lanausse, but I am also here with the Alan to my tequila. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce James Marsh.
Hello, everybody.
How you doing, James?
Very well, and thank you very much for having me on the show. It's a
Of
real
course,
pleasure.
of course. And Savannah, as always, how are you doing? My little
Good.
sweet pea, my little Liebe Schnitzen, whatever the proper
Oh, we're doing German
dialect.
today.
I already warned you both. The matcha is kicking in, so that's just rolling off my tongue. How are you doing, Savannah?
Good. You managed to outdo yourself every time with the intro stuff.
I
Very
try.
proud.
It's always a competition for me. It's always something, and I needed the caffeine to get me to that level. I always go for like point 0.1, a little higher every time. I'd like to think so at least. But yeah, so as you guys know, you all know Savannah, my amazing, beautiful, sweet co-host. And I'm also feeling a little lovey-dovey today, as you noticed.
I can see that.
It's been a good day for me. So how about let's talk about you, James. Let's put the spotlight on you for a second. Tell us about yourself.
Oh, wow. Okay.
A loaded question,
well,
I know.
yeah. What not to tell you? Okay. Well, it should be obvious, but I am British. Uh, so yeah, I'm a film critic and sort of industry consultant based in Hong Kong, and I've been out here for about 20 years. But I'm originally from England, born and bred. That's basically what I do. I'm a film critic for the newspaper here, the South China Morning Post, and on the radio, RTHK Radio 3, which is the English language channel here. And then I also consult with film festivals all over the world and sales agents and distributors to try and help them find Asian films for distribution or for programming, and vice versa. So that's pretty much what I'm here for.
That is awesome. You are in many ways living our little dreams. And it's so cool to have you on here. And not only because I like to think of Savannah and I as amateurs because we don't get paid to do this, but you do. So now it's like we're working with the professionals for the first time. So this is awesome. So just so that way everyone who may not be familiar with your reviews and stuff, kind of give us a little bit of a taste of what kind of movies you like what's your favorite movie, just so everyone who's listening can understand who we're dealing with.
Okay. I shall try. I mean, really, I cover a lot of sort of the new releases week by week that come out in Hong Kong, and that includes Asian films, Chinese, Japanese, Korean films, whatever is on the schedule, as well as the big Hollywood blockbusters and European art houses. Because Hong Kong is a former British colony and English remains one of the official languages, everything, wherever it's from in the world, if it's not in English, it will have English subtitles.
At some point.
So that's great. So that means you can go to the cinema here and watch anything and you'll be okay. You'll be able to understand it. So I cover a lot of stuff like that. I mean, I cover mainly Asian cinema for the paper and mainly like the big Hollywood releases for the radio. That's just the way
That's the way the cookie crumbles.
Exactly. That's just the way, yeah. Exactly that. But obviously, what makes me, dare I say, sort of relevant or important for the international community is keeping tabs on all the new Asian releases and upcoming Asian releases. What's in development, what is being put together, whether it's sort of Japanese indie films or Korean gangster movies or particularly stuff in mainland China and here in Hong Kong.
That's so cool. Any really great movies that you've seen recently? Any ones that come to mind?
Well, I mean, it's such a tricky time right now, isn't it? I mean, so many films have sort of been delayed, and I mean, Hong Kong doesn't really necessarily keep up day and date with stuff that would normally be coming out in the US anyway. So we're often behind, and this is just kind of putting us even further behind, really. What have I liked? I was trying to think of some decent.
It
I tell you
makes
what,
it even harder because you have companies like Netflix that's just turning out stuff but not telling anyone. And it's so I think Netflix has like a new movie coming out every single week for the year, at least in the US.
Yeah.
So it's so hard. Like it's not like as easy as it was when it's like, oh, you go to this day and they blow up the entire date and everything, and when the No Time to Die is coming out and stuff like that. But for these, it just seems like the movies that are coming out are just kind of being tossed under the radar.
I mean, it's funny with Netflix because on the one hand, they're actually providing a platform for the studios and for these sort of mid-level films that wouldn't get a look in otherwise. And they're actually providing a sort of an opportunity where they can be released. It means that, they have to let go of their dreams of a theatrical release, but at least they're getting out there. I think the most interesting thing that we've seen sort of in the last 12 months is that without all of those massive blockbusters even in the mix, you are spending a lot more time, as a critic, I can say firsthand, you're spending a lot more time on films you wouldn't normally be giving that many words in your column to, or that many minutes on air to, just because you'd be always focusing on Dune or James Bond or what the people want. And so for the smaller films, this has been actually quite fortuitous, really. And you only have to look at like what's up for Oscars this year to see that something like Sound of Metal. Just it's a great movie, but it just wouldn't have had a look in, I don't think. Maybe in the sound category or something like that. But just because all of these big hitters are out of the way, like that Dune is not in the running. Spielberg was supposed to have West Side Story out, right? And I'm sure that would have got a ton of nominations.
Totally forgot about that. Forgot that was a thing.
That thing. But it just gives these smaller films the opportunity, and I think that's where Netflix and Amazon and Apple and all the others have actually sort of stepped up a little bit, and they're providing those platforms for others. So it's been interesting, and I mean, here the cinemas are open again. They're at 50% capacity, and people are sort of cautiously going back. Yeah. Because although they're open, people are like, well, yeah, but what's out? What is there worth seeing?
Yeah.
And the truth is, there isn't a great amount, and we're just getting Nomadland and Promising Young Woman and things like that are just coming out now, which traditionally here will always come out around Oscar time. I mean, a film like Nomadland, for example, it's not going to be a big financial success for whoever releases it. Yeah. It just isn't. It's not that kind of movie. So they will wait until it starts winning things, and then they'll release it on the back of that, rather than bring it out in like November.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. So that way it can at least, if it does win something, come the Oscars, it'll gain some traction in.
Exactly that. I mean, so on the one hand, it's frustrating for people who live here when they're seeing everybody's like end of year list, like last December, and it's got all these movies on that we're not going to get until like March or April time. Yeah. But on the other hand, it makes sense for the local distributor to wait until it has all this gold attached to it, and then put it out when people actually want to see it.
Yeah, and it just sucks because like I know me and Savanna all the time are like, we want to go to a movie, and then there's also specifically this dine-in theater by her house. So good. What's the name of it, Savanna? Sinopolis. It is the best because it's not. It's just they have popcorn. They have the recliner seats and stuff. Blah blah blah. But it's like all of a sudden you're getting like Korean barbecue tacos. You're getting a whole medley of everything. It's so good. In the theater, and oh my god, the best milkshake I've ever had was in a movie theater, and it was in this one. I paid $9 for this milkshake, and I will gladly pay double because it was so good. It was just awesome. But like we think about it, and it's like really there are no new movies, and like we would go and enjoy seeing the like the re-releases and stuff. Like I think one of the last times we went to the movie theaters we saw Clockwork Orange in Sinopolis at this theater, which was a great experience. But with everything, probably the prices of the food is going to go way up in order to account for, now my $8, $9 milkshake is now going to be $30 on its own. And also just there was a report in the US, sadly, that one of the most places, like they did a place where it's like most likely like where you can get COVID from, like the highest rate of transmission, and movie theater was number one. And below it was even something like a hairdresser where someone's like around you and stuff like that. It was a very startling. It was because a lot of movie theaters just don't have the equipment to like deep clean all these, chairs, seats, and everything there.
Oh, that's fascinating because actually the movie theaters here are probably one of the best regulated public sort of spaces. And I've been really impressed with how they've been doing it. I mean, because they've been very strict right from the get-go. I mean, we all know that movie theaters make their money from drinks and popcorn and what have you. It costs them nothing, but they charge you, $9.
$9 for a milkshake.
Yeah, exactly. But that was one of the first restrictions they put in place. It was no food, no drink, no excuse.
At all?
Yeah, none. So no excuse to be not wearing your mask the entire time.
Oh, that makes sense.
That's smart.
Yeah, so you're not pulling it down. You're not taking off going, oh, well, I'm eating. It's like, well, you're not eating now. So you've got no excuse.
They should have done that for Disney here. Disney is the same where it's like you have people just holding up a like empty canister and they're like, I'm drinking. And then their mask is down under their lip the entire time. They should have done that here for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it seems sort of counterintuitive in a way, but that's how you keep the place safe, So, and then also even before, because right now, whenever you go into anywhere, they're making you kind of sign in or use this QR code to kind of keep track of where everybody is at all times. Not Big Brother at all, not at all.
Not at all.
But even before that, because we've had sort of like everywhere else, 3 or 4 waves now. You had to wear a mask the whole time, and you get your temperature checked on the way into the building.
Yeah.
And so if you beep that in the wrong way, you're not coming in. Simple as that.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Man, they should have done that for here, but
well,
it is what it is. It is what it is. It is what it is. And real quickly, before we get into our own reviews, I keep hearing about a movie, and I want to know if either of you have heard of it or seen it. It's a newer release on Netflix, so I don't know, James, if it's available in your area or if you even heard of it. It's called Synchronic. Apparently, it's.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Have you heard of it or seen it? Either of you?
I've heard of it. I haven't seen it.
Okay, James, what have you heard about it?
I've heard of it and I've seen it. I should also probably point out right off the bat, it was sold by a company called XYZ Films that I used to consult for, and I know the directors quite well. Aaron
nice
Moorhead
little humble
and Justin.
brag there.
I think it's got okay, but then all that said, I think it's not their best work. If I'm completely honest, it's pretty decent. It's an interesting sort of sci-fi time travel thing done on a small scale with very big ideas, and they've got a really big cast. It's like their biggest cast for one of their films to date. They've got Anthony Mackie and Jamie Dornan in there, who play, I think, paramedics who get caught up with this new synthetic drug that sort of enables the user to sort of shift through time in the same spot. And it's set down in New Orleans, which obviously has a very rich, deep history, and they explore that. And obviously with Anthony Mackie being an African-American character at that part of the world, if you're shifting through different periods of history, that's going to play an important role as well.
Oh, crap.
So it's tackling all of these really, really sort of interesting ideas. I felt, if I'm completely honest, that the sort of through-line thriller plot of it wasn't their strongest, and I don't think it did I don't think it totally serviced the ideas and the world that they had kind of created. But at the same time, I think it's got so many fascinating ideas. It's definitely something that you should have a look. And I noticed, I think it was Aaron, who's one of the directors. I think we're Facebook friends, and he was very happy because it was #1 on Netflix over the weekend. I think.
Yeah, because he was posting. I got a message from an old friend from high school saying, "Hey, I don't know if you heard this, but you should check it out on one of your podcast episodes." And I looked it up, and it says it was made like 2 years ago. I think it was made like one of those where it took a while to get distribution and stuff like that. So I was like, "Oh, okay." I didn't hear of it, and then like the next day I saw like 3 people post about it. And I think it's because it is trending on Netflix and stuff that people are probably quickly going to it and stuff like that. And I saw a lot of people saying good things. I was just very surprised because it seemed like it really like blew up overnight. Like I'd never heard of it being made. I'd never seen a trailer for it or anything. But yeah, I definitely think, Savannah, what do you think? I think it's something that we should definitely check out down the road.
I saw it today. I saw it trending on Netflix. That's the only reason I know. But yeah.
Sure. Okay.
Oh, excellent. I mean, and if it turns people on to Aaron and Justin's work, then even better, because I think it's their fourth film. And I think actually they have now just signed on with Marvel to do the Moon Knight TV show with Oscar Isaac.
Them?
I think it's them. I think that's what they're doing next, which is fantastic for them, because all their films so far have been like very sort of modestly budgeted, sort of little indie thrillers. So this is a huge step up for them. But I mean, what I will say is, if you like that or like the ideas going on, check out one of their films called Spring. I couldn't tell you exactly where it's available in the US, unfortunately, but check your platforms and it'll be there. But they did a film probably about 5 years ago now called Spring. I'm not going to tell you anything about it.
Okay.
That's part of the fun. But yeah, watch that, check that out, and it's great. I mean, they are definitely incredibly talented, for sure.
By any chance, because when you said XYZ, I don't know if it's done by them. I know they've worked with XYZ has worked with Jesse Eisenberg before. Do you know if XYZ did a movie called The Double?
Oh, I know the film The Double. Richard Ayoade, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. They did one called Vivarium.
With
Jesse
they're the
Eisenberg.
people who made Tusk. Oh, I gotta watch it then.
Well, XYZ did Tusk as well. XYZ
Yes.
sold Tusk, yeah, which I know you're a big fan of.
Oh my God! Wait, Savannah, what was the movie that we scored Tusk higher than in our review, and we felt so guilty about?
Oh, it was well, the
Was
Romero.
it Night of the Living Dead?
Yeah.
We committed a sin
it's
that
very
day,
sad.
and we were grinning while we did it too. And we knew, we were like, "Are we gonna do this?" Like, I remember we just had like recording a deliberation for a minute, going, "Are we gonna say it? Are we gonna say it? Tusk is better." And we
We're like,
did it.
no one's gonna take us seriously after this. No, it's okay. Like,
Yeah, that was probably one of those, like, I felt guilty about it, but it felt so good to say it, because it's just, I truly feel like Tusk is one of those movies that's get crapped on relentlessly, but I really, really like it for some reason. Not just because of Kevin, but I think on its own, it's a pretty interesting film, to say the least.
Well, respect for sticking to your principles and to your guns. I mean, it's so tempting sometimes to just kind of go with the flow and be like, this is the one I'm supposed to like, so I'll say this one's better. But if you don't, then just say you don't.
And
okay.
I can admit, sometimes we've had questionable taste. Like, for example, if you put a gun to my head and said, best Spielberg film, I'd look at you right in the eyes and say, Poltergeist, and you'd probably pull the trigger just because it's my favorite.
There's a lot to unpack with that particular choice.
A lot. But it's just one of those things where it's like, I know I'm going against the code. I know it's like going against the samurai code, and I know I'm about to become a Ronin, but I am more than okay with doing so.
Well, that's one of those films I remember being very emotionally scarred by, because I think it has like a sort of PG rating or something, doesn't it? It has
PG-13.
The rating is like inappropriate, and the scene where the guy's sort of hallucinating in the bathroom and peels his own face off.
Yeah.
I mean, I was, I hate to think how old I was when that came out. Way too young, put it that way. And that has stayed with me ever since. It's just one of those sort of pivotal horror moments that you're like, okay, that's changed me forever. Something just broke inside.
And in the podcast where we talk about it, I talk about how, remember there's like one scene where it's like you have like this weird white demonic looking thing that's like all skeletons with like a long ass neck and stuff. One night, imagine this, I'm loving this movie, right? It's one of my favorite movies of all time. Even like when I was like a kid, it was just one of my favorites of all time. I go through like sleep paralysis. That's my sleep paralysis demon.
Oh.
I come out of it still thinking that movie is one of my favorites of all time. I don't know how I was able to get through that mental threshold, but I did somehow. And that's, whether that's impressive or just a damn shame, I don't care. All right. So let's let's stay on track here and let's get
Mm.
into what we're here for. So the first movie we're going to be talking about is Hard Boil, and I'm going to introduce it. Oh wait, hold on. I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm getting way too ahead of myself. So I totally realized I had another question to ask you, James. So since you live in Hong Kong, because it does briefly relate to one of the films we're going to be talking about, can you briefly explain like what exactly is going on right now in Hong Kong?
Wow. That's
It's again
tricky. I
another
mean,
loaded question.
yeah, a lot is the short answer. Okay, so to boil it down very quickly, a potted history, if you like. So Hong Kong was a British colony, as was unfortunately quite a lot of the world at one point or another. And about 120 years ago, they needed a bit more land. They needed more for infrastructure, and they needed reservoirs for fresh water and all this kind of. So they made a negotiation with the Chinese government that they would lease this area of the mainland, if you like, called the New Territories for 99 years. But the condition was that once those 99 years were over, the UK had to give back all of it. They had to give back everything, and that sort of turned around that came in 1997. Which is when the handover happened, which is when everything was handed back to China. Now, in the meantime, Hong Kong had obviously become this very sort of prosperous financial center. It was an area where companies could come, big banks, whatever, could come and do business with China, but without being within the sort of the regulated domain of China, if you like. And that was, and it's a big, busy port city and all of that kind of thing. It's a sort of gateway to Asia and all the rest of it. And so it had become incredibly sort of prosperous. And everybody was very worried about what would happen in 1997. Would just the PLA army just roll their tanks in? And, no one had any idea what was going to happen. And so when Margaret Thatcher was Prime Minister of Britain in the 80s, she negotiated this sort of treaty, this kind of grace period, if you like, with the Chinese government that Hong Kong would maintain its own sort of autonomy, and it would be sort of self-regulated with its own appointed officials and what have you for 50 years after the handover. And that's what we're in the middle of right now. So between 1997 and 2047 is supposed to be this kind of grace period, where Hong Kong will be left alone by China, by everybody else, to just kind of sort itself out, gently ease into it. Now, unfortunately, what has happened, particularly in the last sort of 2 years, is that China is not honoring that agreement, and that they are slowly chipping away at the bits of it that they don't really like. Mainly our right for free speech, free press, and free assembly. So our right to protest, essentially. And Hong Kong has always had a very sort of healthy sort of sense of freedom of protest. And a couple of times a year, particularly on dates like the anniversary of the Tiananmen Square massacre, which has been, largely brushed over in textbooks and history books.
Yeah,
on
I've
the mainland.
never heard of that before.
I don't know if you're joking.
No, I literally have never heard of that before.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, we don't
heard of
learn
it
a lot
recently.
about China or Hong Kong
Yeah.
here in the U.S., sadly. It's just not
Okay.
in our textbooks.
Tiananmen Square is like the big square in the middle of Beijing
Okay.
in China. And in 4th of June 1989, there was a huge student protest going on, and there were literally hundreds of thousands of students in that square, and they were there for days, and they were protesting, all kinds of encroachments on their freedom.
Yeah.
And the Chinese government had enough, and they literally just rolled the tanks in, and just the army came in, and still to this day there are no definite figures of how many people were killed, injured, arrested,
Holy
disappeared
crap.
when that happened. There is a very famous photograph of literally a procession of tanks coming down the road, and then just one man standing in the road holding like a carrier bag, like a plastic bag.
I think I've
He's
seen that.
He's unarmed. If you've seen that image, that is the defining image of the peaceful protest against the Chinese government and the Chinese military. So, and I think actually the BBC was one of the few news organizations that were there at the time, and they did some coverage on it. Go on YouTube, do have a look, do see what's going on. so it was this horrendous sort of atrocity, and obviously really shook the people of Hong Kong, who were just like right there. We're right there on the border, right next to them, and arguably are perceived to be a sort of a dissenting population, if you like. And I think everybody here knows what they're capable of because of things like Tiananmen Square. So anyway, cut to like last year, and China has tried to implement what's called an extradition bill into the Hong Kong Basic Law, which is this 50-year list of of rights that Hong Kong is supposed to have. And basically, what it enabled China to do was to extradite potential suspects into the mainland, and they have a very sort of opaque system there. It's not very well controlled or regulated. There's no oversight. They have like a 99% conviction rate in trials. So essentially, once you're in the system, you're going all the way.
You're done.
You're done. It hasn't gone through that extradition bill, and it caused huge peaceful protests in the streets of Hong Kong 2 summers ago. And then those erupted into violent clashes with the police that then escalated and turned into sort of rioting and all the rest of it. And that only really ended because COVID rolled in, and it was, no one was allowed to protest anymore.
That's insane.
So what has been happening in the last sort of year since the protests have kind of died down because of COVID is that lots of members of opposing political parties and local district councillors and key members of the protest movements have all just been arrested. And they've implemented this new law, which now is in place, called the National Security Law, which basically means that they can arrest anybody for sort of anything that is perceived as sedition or dissension or anything like that. And it can also be retroactively applied. So that they can say, this new law that only came into power last week, we can nail you for something you did last year.
Oh my God. It's not grandfathered in.
Yeah, and that is in place now. That came into place
That's
last
crazy.
summer, and they've just been cleaning up since then. So it's kind of pretty hairy.
It's very sad because there's so many things going on in terms of China and the relationships with other places like Hong Kong, and especially like what's going on in more northern Asia, where you have like the Muslim concentration camps that like people keep forgetting about. It's so crazy how just from time to time, I don't know how, or at least in the US media, it always falls, under, especially like when we were going through our election, you would see like, millions of people, like you would see a headline where it would be like millions of Muslims kept in the I believe it's pronounced the Uyghurs, kept in concentration camps.
The
Uyghurs, thank you. Uyghurs, kept in concentration camps. And then at the top, it would be like, Trump said something stupid. And it was just like, always get shifted down and down to the point where it's like, until this conversation, I totally forgot that was even going on in that side of the world. It really is just so crazy and unfathomable. But in terms of what Britain's
back to movies.
I wanted to know with because you said Thatcher was the one who proposed these agreements and everything. Does Boris I forgot I only know him by his first
Johnson.
name. Thank you, Boris Johnson.
It's called Boris.
Old friend Boris. Does he have any plans on creating a new document or trying to or is he just kind of like ignoring that?
Well, this is why part of the disillusion that everybody's been feeling in Hong Kong is that since the handover, Britain has really done nothing. They've if anybody was going to sort of oversee that the basic law for 50 years was being adhered to and was being observed, it should have been the British.
Yeah.
But as soon as 1997 happened, as soon as the handover happened, they essentially kind of turned their back on Hong Kong.
Yeah, they just kind of washed their hands.
And they just said, yeah, we're done. And what was fascinating to see during the protests in 2019 was that people were not really calling for British support, but that you suddenly saw a lot of sort of American flags, and you're like, hang on, that doesn't make sense. And people were actually weirdly pro-Trump And the reason was, I know, and it took a little unpacking, but essentially what it was is because Trump is always looking to was always looking to sort of get a better deal with China in terms of trade and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
And anything he could do to antagonize that relationship, he would do it. And he just saw Hong Kong as, and what was going on in Hong Kong as something he could use for leverage in order to try and get
essentially.
Stick it to China with, essentially. And so, there were people in Hong Kong who perceived this as, Trump sticking up for them, whereas he wasn't. He was only doing it for himself. But it was kind of the mentality of the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And so we were kind of sitting there going, no.
A dirty dance, if you will.
Trump does not care about you. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, the fact that he was applying pressure to China in the name of Hong Kong. Yeah, when nobody else was, that was something. It was very odd. It didn't last very long, but it was there for a bit. And it was a little bit strange.
That's so crazy. Well, I really hope before things get worse, especially when COVID dies down, you don't go through a, exuberant amount of police brutality due to those protests and things like that. And normally I would say maybe America could help, but we're in the crapper as well. Like we're in the crapper. Like here, it's just, we have a lot of issues on our own as well. And I'm not speaking for the American people here. Do not think I'm speaking on behalf. Yeah, but it's so crazy. But I really hope that there's some kind of resolution, soon, at least, especially since it just kind of seems like China is just being able to get away with more and more, and crossing over that boundary between like what the treaty says and everything.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, it doesn't look good. But I think the best Hong Kong can hope for really is that just the rest of that agreement is honoured. Mm-hmm. They've got what about sort of 27 years left of it or whatever.
Yeah.
And I there are some people calling for independence, and that's never going to happen. Let's be realistic. But I think what should happen, what the city needs to happen, is that that its autonomy is at least honoured for the agreed upon period. But I think everybody's confidence has just deteriorated so much now. It's just a case of when rather than if. Crazy.
Mm-hmm. But the reason why I wanted to talk about that is because, like I said, it does have relation to the second movie we're going to talk about. However, we're going to jump into a little bit of a lighter note and talk about a John Woo movie, and specifically Hard Boiled. So Hard Boiled came out in 1992, and the plot is a tough-as-nail cop teams up with an undercover agent to shut down a sinister mobster and his crew. So the two main stars of this film are Chow Yun-fat, who plays Tequila, which is just the best name you could give to a main lead, as well as Tony Lun, who plays Alan. And I think I double-checked and tried looking up Lun pronunciation. I think I'm there.
Leung with a G on the end. Leung.
Leung. Thank you. Lerng is kind of pronounced. Okay. So Tony Leung. So when we were discussing movies and stuff like that to pick out, Hard Boiled obviously was picked. So James, why don't you tell us a little bit like what Hard Boiled means to you, what your thoughts overall on Hard Boiled is?
Okay. It's one of my favorite Hong Kong movies. It was one of the... it might be because it was also one of the first Hong Kong movies I ever saw. I saw it before I moved over here. And I was an impressionable teen at the time because this was John Woo's last Hong Kong movie before he went over to Hollywood. And it was actually Jean-Claude Van Damme that brought him over to Hollywood.
Oh, wow. Out of all people, I wouldn't have thought him.
It was amazing that Jean-Claude Van Damme was actually incredibly pivotal in the Hollywood success of a number of Hong Kong filmmakers, because he had come over as a martial artist trying to get work in
that makes sense. Yeah.
In Hong Kong action movies already. But then he realized that the roles for him in Hong Kong movies, if he couldn't speak Cantonese, were few and far between. So he kind of paid it forward, and he went back to Hollywood, where he was starting to get bigger movies, and brought these directors over. John Woo, Ringo Lam, Choi Hark, all kind of came over and started directing movies for him and spread out that way. So I first sort of heard about this movie when Hard Target came out, which was, I think, 93, which was John Woo's first Hollywood movie. starring Jean-Claude Van
Okay.
Damme with a ridiculous mullet. It's a fun movie. It's kind of like a updated version of the Most Dangerous Game. It's basically sort of bad guys down in the Louisiana bayou, sort of hunting. I think they're war veterans. I think it's like Vietnam War veterans. They just give them a bit of money, let them out,
Oh
let them
my
out into the
God.
bayou, and then rich guys can pay to hunt them for sport.
That's insane.
Oh,
Oh,
God.
God. I never heard of that
Yeah.
movie.
Oh, it's great. Check it out. I mean,
Okay.
it's bonkers, but it's great. Yeah, and obviously they pick Van Damme, and they pick the wrong guy. You know, he turns the tables and takes them all out. So when that came out, everyone was like, "Oh, it's directed by this guy John Woo, and his Hong Kong filmography was second to none in terms of sort of action cinema and creating sort of shooting action as if it was kind of an art movie almost, you know." And you look at Hard Target, where he was really trying to sort of throw everything but the kitchen sink in there. And the story is very secondary. You know, it's light. You know, you've got a cop, you've got a no-nonsense cop, and you've got the undercover cop, and you've got gangs fighting each other for control of the arms trade.
Yeah.
You know, which they're operating out of the basement of a hospital with a very busy maternity ward. And so you've got just a lot of slow-mo, a lot of gunplay, a lot of
slow mo, a lot, like
lot of
way
slow-
more than I imagined. Like even
Yeah.
I thought,
Yeah.
2046, the next movie we were going to talk about had some slow mos. This one was just like any turn, anytime a character pivoted, it had to be in slow motion.
slow-mo, and then freeze. The freeze frame dissolve is a favorite of mine. You know,
Yes.
there's so many scenes that ended like just with a close-up of Chow Yun-fat and then dissolve into whatever the next scene was. So there's a lot of that. I mean, the way he shoots explosions and gunfights,
Yeah.
you know, it's almost like firework displays, you know, and he uses all these optical filters just to create something a little bit more just visually impressive than your run-of-the-mill gunfight. I think a lot of the iconography that he uses for his gunplay, particularly, was then later sort of lifted and used in Hollywood movies. There's the two guys standing opposite each other with guns to each other's forehead. That's a John Woo thing. He's even ripping himself off there.
Yeah.
He did it in Better Tomorrow. He did it in The Killer, and now he does it here. Tarantino was one of his big fans, and so you saw these standoffs in like Reservoir
Yeah.
Dogs, True Romance. You know, all of these sort of Tarantino
Pulp
movies.
Fiction.
Yeah, of course, you know, so many times in all of these movies, and that's all ripped off from John Woo particularly. And then, you know, it's like the line in Hot Fuzz: "Have you ever jumped through the air while firing two guns at the same time?" That's a John Woo thing, and you see
Yeah.
that happening a few times here. So it's more about just, you know, the way he presents action in a way that has never been done before, and then it also narratively has this great recurring idea that the good guys and the bad guys are not so different after all. You know, I mean, Heat is the great recent sort of Hollywood example of this kind of idea that, you know, in another world at another time, they would be best mates, or even better, they're two sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
You know, so it's about, you know, Tony Leung is obviously this conflicted guy who's got in too deep, you know, and he's living the life of crime and starting to enjoy it. You know, there's a scene where he's just like machine guns his whole old gang just so that he can win over the trust of Johnny Boy or whatever his name is, the bad guy. And then Tequila is arguably a Dirty Harry style character operating outside of, you know, the way that he should. And I know, you know, in today's society we shouldn't be glorifying cops who whatever they want, but you know,
in an action
80s
movie,
in an 80s 90s action movie, that was kind of cool.
yeah.
And so he's the cop who's bad, and then you've got the bad guy who's good, and obviously ultimately they come together at the end. And I think one of my favorite sequences is towards the end, and it's during the whole hospital showdown. And the hospital thing lasts half the movie, if you notice.
Yeah.
It's like
Yes.
the entire second half of the movie is like the climax, really. There's this sequence that's shot as a single long take, and they're moving down the corridor in slow-mo and they keep kind of crisscrossing their positions.
And they go in
it's
the
a very
elevator, and it's never moving. They just clean up. I can't imagine, because I was reading
and
trivia
reload.
about that. Where
I think
you
it's the
had them
only time
going-
in the movie. It's the only time in the movie you see them reload. I think.
Oh, of course,
Um,
of course. Yeah, and then I think
when-
in that same scene, they kept going into the elevator, but the elevator's not moving. They just had like a bunch of brooms, and like the cleaning crew just came in and like cleaned out the entire floor again, and they just
fantastic.
redid the scene. Which
just going just long enough so we can redress the set and
I
then
can't
go back
imagine
out again.
how intense it would have been for like the PAs on that show to just have probably like 4-foot wide brooms just to get all the empty shell casings out of the set and everything. So I really I don't know about, so was this your James, so in terms of you said it was one of your first like Hong Kong cinema films. Was it like your first John Woo film?
I think actually I probably saw Hard Target first.
Okay.
Because I think if I remember, I mean, I was in the UK back then, but I think sort of that the month that it came out, or probably that month, they put Hard Target and The Killer, two of John Woo's best films, into UK cinemas.
Oh, okay.
Because obviously, this one, Hard Boiled, was still considered like a new movie. It was probably only like a year old. And then The Killer is a couple of years older and is also awesome, but had never been released in the UK. So I think they were like in limited, and they were released as art house movies because they're because they're Chinese movies.
And I know Hard Boiled and The
early
Killer
90s,
are considered to be part of like the Criterion Collection, but they're out of print.
They
and
were,
stuff like that.
yeah.
But I want to ask Savanna. So for me, this was my second John Woo movie. Did you ever see a John Woo movie prior? And if so, which one? Because I was not expecting it to be as good because of the first movie I watched.
What did you watch?
Face Off. I'm not a fan of Face Off.
Okay.
But I do feel like, and I think it's mostly due to the acting. I just can't take Travolta and Cage seriously when they're so exuberant and things like that. So I wasn't expecting. I knew this was in the Criterion Collection, and I was.
But do you see just before you get into it? But do you see how the themes are recurrent in Face Off? I mean, Face Off is like the literal, personification of, you've got these two guys who are literally exactly the same as each other because they are now exactly the same as each other.
I do think
they're running around with each other's face on.
I think it's a good theme, but I do think Face Off was just a little too exuberant for me, if you will, for an action movie at least. Whereas this one, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I had a really good time watching this movie. I mean, with this movie, you can't have a bad time watching this movie. I mean, it's just a bunch of really great choreographed action sequences. Like, I'm not a huge action movie fan. Like, if you are like, let's watch The Expendables, I'm gonna go, I think I'd rather nap on your couch. Like, but what I really like about this movie in particular is that the effort to do all these sequences and everything, the action and stuff, the everything at the moment you get to the hospital scene too. Well, essentially the second arc of the film, the hospital scene. It just takes like a crazy toll. I really love the amount of effort, choreography, and I really, really enjoyed this film. I did also write, I always write little notes when I'm watching certain movies. This one, I knew I was going to like this movie when the minute it opens up and Chow Yun-fat is on the sax, or it was at the clarinet or the saxophone. But right then I was like, okay, I'm gonna like this film. I also like the fact that was pretty much I learned that he was like, hey, can I just play some jazz? Like, that was on him. That was not the director's part. That was him, which I just thoroughly enjoyed. But Savanna, what did you think of this movie?
I really liked it. I think it was refreshing for me because I don't know about you guys, but most of the action movies I've seen, I guess in the past couple of years, are kind of mixed with drama. So for example, like, the action doesn't come into like midpoint of the movie. You got to learn about the backstory. There's got to be some whatever. So I did appreciate like 10 minutes into the movie, it's intense. The whole movie is intense and it's quite violent, but in a good way. So it was refreshing to see that. because I'm used to seeing like, oh, I got to figure out his backstory and learn that his whole family died and all of this stuff. So I enjoyed that. I enjoyed all the effects, the motorcycles blowing up. That was my favorite part. The jazz. So I really liked it. I enjoyed it. It was, I wouldn't say it exceeded my expectations. I didn't really know what I was going into, but I really liked it.
It's
I'm
a
very happy to
really
hear that you both
enjoyable
liked it
movie.
because I don't know why I had a feeling that there was a chance that you guys wouldn't, and so I'm relieved. I'm relieved to hear that you did. I mean, it's if you peel back. I mean, the one thing you got to say about the action is that it's all done practically as
Yeah.
well. You know, so much of the action movies that you watch today, you know, are just it's all done in front of green screen.
Yeah.
We are seeing a little bit of that kind of coming back in with John Wick and Nobody. If you've seen Nobody, this new movie
I've
with
heard a
Bob
lot of good things
Odenkirk in
about
it.
it, but I want to see it.
Right. You know, so there is a portion of the industry that's trying to go back to these roots of like doing everything in camera practically for real. But
Yeah.
you know, and I think a lot of that kind of, you know, it's heightened. You know, it's not realistic, but it's not realistic in different ways. You know, you've got wire work going on. You know, you've got people kind of flying through the air and defying gravity in ways that obviously they wouldn't. You know, guns that never run out of bullets unless it's
Yeah.
a plot point. You know, people. There's a brilliant shot where I think it's Tony Leung is diving through a car as it
I
explodes.
wrote that on here. I
Yes.
wrote that because my
Okay.
favorite part is when he runs into someone. He runs into someone with the front wheel of the motorcycle, and you just see. Of course, they didn't use
Oh,
someone.
he
You
goes
just see
up
this
into the
dummy
back
just
of the truck.
collapse in the back. That I loved that. And I also liked that this film had so much unpredictability to it.
Yeah.
I feel like
yeah.
most action films are very predictable, and one of the best things about it is it really is unpredictable.
Yeah.
Like, for example, was not expecting the character Alan to get a shotgun in the kidney when he's on the boat. I was like, what's going on? Are we like stopping midway? He lost a kidney. Like, we can't
And he
go on
kinda just-
anymore.
He kind of just shakes it off and keeps going.
Yeah, then his friend is in the hospital. The other guy's in the hospital. He's like, how's that guy doing? Meanwhile, he's got no treatments. He's fine. Like, maybe like a 1 hour hospital visit after being shot in the kidney. Like,
Right.
but I really, like, I liked how it was. And I really appreciate that with any film. If it's unpredictable and it makes
Yeah.
sense. And that's where this does. Like, it works. Especially one of the best parts is with Chow Yun-fat and the baby. And
Yes.
not just him, because you expect him to be like, you know, you with the gun like brah brah, like all where, and then I was expecting him to be like, here, lady, take this child while I go kill some more. But instead, he looks at the baby and is like, you're so cute. Let me wipe the blood off your face, and just has like a really sweet human interaction, like amongst all the violence going on. I really, really appreciate that. As well as I find some moments here and there like very like funny. Like there would just be random like moments where like Chow Yun-fat would look over and be like, bullshit, and it would just continue. I appreciate a lot of elements of this movie. And one of the things I did write was that hard-boiled walked, so movies like The Departed could run. I will
Okay.
say that about this movie.
That's true. That's true.
We-
I did see that.
You know that The Departed is a remake of a Hong Kong movie, right?
I did not.
Wow. We're so uneducated. We need to, we
That
need to
stars
stop.
that stars Tony Leung. Tony Leung is the DiCaprio character in the original
You
movie.
see, this
We're on
is
the
why
money.
we have to have a professional on here at all times, Savannah, to keep
Okay.
us in check.
We don't know what we're
can't-
talking about. clearly.
Okay, there's a Hong Kong movie from about 2002 called Infernal Affairs, and it was not Internal Affairs but Infernal Affairs, like
Okay.
in the Inferno kind of thing. And it's Andy Lau and Tony Leung. And Tony Leung is essentially, it's not the same character, but he's doing a lot of callbacks to his character from Hard Boiled. Because he's the undercover cop that has been in there too long and he wants out, but the only cops who know he's still who know he's still a cop are dying. And so he's stuck. He can't get out. And his what would you call it? His contact, the one cop that knows he's
yeah.
he's still a cop, is Anthony Wong, who plays Johnny Boy, the main bad guy in Hard Boiled.
Oh, wow.
So
What a connection.
you know, so So part of it is
Crazy.
just there's this very small pool of talent in Hong Kong that you've got to work with. But there are some very deliberate choices in Infernal Affairs that are calling back to this movie and many
For
movies
sure.
like it. So definitely watch that.
See,
There are a couple of sequels which are, but the first one, Infernal Affairs, is great, and I'm pretty sure you should be able to find that like on Netflix or somewhere quite
well,
easily.
you just made history, at least for me, because John Woo just went up on my list, and Scorsese, he took a knee. He took a knee. Depart. Everyone's like, "Oh
Okay,
my God, The Departed." It's not original. You can sit down, Scorsese.
it's
Sit
it's
down.
not a
Agreed.
it's not a John Woo movie. It's not a John Woo movie.
Oh, I know,
It's a
but like I said,
but it's
John Woo walked so Scorsese could run with The Departed, so that's why he's
right.
going up a notch on my scale.
Right. Oh yeah, I mean, but John Woo was very much sort of the architect of this kind of movie in Hong Kong as well. And action movies even to this day in Hong Kong are still trying to recapture
Yeah, it seemed like
the John
he
Woo magic.
nailed the genre of buddy cop because I was even looking like buddy
Hmm.
cop films before this. I think it was like Lethal Weapon and maybe like
Yeah.
some other, but more like drama comedies and action comedies and things like that. But really looking at it, I was like, wow, I really think he kind of solidified what like the buddy cop or the cop drama, really
Yeah.
should, or even the gangster films really should be. So even though I don't think this is the best movie ever made, it's not my favorite action movie of all time, but it definitely
Hmm.
is something I would recommend, and it definitely is something in terms
Yeah.
of one of the scales like for movies because we do a rating system as well as if we would own it on DVD or not. And this is something that I would love to own on DVD, and I would try to find the Criterion version because I'd like to get my hands on the bonus features.
Yeah, I think the Criterion. I think there's a laser disc of it, but there's definitely a DVD
Yeah,
of
but
this
it's out
and
of
the
print, and I
Killer.
think it went out of print like over 15 years ago. So
It
good
did. It did.
luck.
I remember. Like over like about 15 years ago when I was sort of started collecting the Criterion Collection. They were already out of print, and they were the ones on eBay going for crazy, like
Yeah.
hundreds and hundreds of dollars, and that was for a DVD back then. I mean, the only other thing I want to point out about this film is that, and it's true, I think, of most of Hong Kong cinema, is the sincerity of it. You know,
Right.
it's you're talking about how this is an action movie without the drama, but I'm not sure I agree with you on that point because I think these characters are sort of incredibly sort of sincere and emotional and wear their hearts on their sleeves throughout. Tony Leung is wrestling with his sort of identity, and he's sitting there on his boat making his little origami cranes the whole time for every person that he's killed in the line of duty and what have you, and he's tortured, and it leaves the ending kind of ambiguous. I don't think it's necessarily literal whether he gets away at the end, that when he sails off at the end on the boat, whether we're supposed to be like, oh, he's okay, fine, or whether it's a poetic metaphor and that he has died, but that was the only escape that he was ever going to get, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure. So I like that about it. There's no subtlety. It's big and loud and bang, but when it's trying to make a sort of an emotional point,
A
that's
connection.
big and loud. That's big and
Yeah.
loud as well. I also just want to say, poor Theresa Mo. She's like the one woman in the movie, and every scene with her involves either flowers or a baby, and you're just
Of
like,
course.
ah, she's a
Of
lady.
course.
So yes. But I love all that. I liked all that stuff with the flowers, and they're trying to make Chow Yun Fat jealous because she's being sent flowers by somebody,
Yeah.
That was
and
good.
the way of passing on sort of passwords
I've
through
noticed
song
in a
lyrics.
lot of like, for example, I noticed I made the connection because that's Teresa is playing Chow Yun Fat's character's girlfriend in the movie. I was also thinking Police Story. The only other girl involved in the movie, besides the one girl who's like the daughter, like the girl who he has to protect. But I feel like a lot of buddy cop films always just throw in the girlfriend as like some kind of a type of bait or to just. I
Yeah.
just noticed that while watching this movie.
Well, usually women are in general, no.
Yeah, sadly.
No, I mean in these kind of movies.
I was like, you said that, not me. But no, yeah. Unfortunately, in these kind of movies, they are sort of sidelined. I think what was interesting is that originally, I mean, this movie went through a lot of sort of rejigging and rewriting at the last minute before they actually started it. And originally, Michelle Yeoh was supposed to play that character, and I imagine it would have been an incredibly different character because obviously she's a real capable action heroine in her own right. But for one reason or another, they had to sort of change it completely. But yeah, I mean, this is a movie I'm always going to love, and it was great having the excuse to go back and watch it again.
Yeah.
Talking to you
one
guys.
of the things that I when we talk about the whole buddy cop system, one of the things that I did like was that you had two characters who are equal adversaries. I get very tired with like I said, the buddy cop system where one of them has to be like the chunky delinquent that can't do anything or he's just incompetent, and then you have like, you know, Dwayne the Rock Johnson or you know, some you know, monolith of a man. And so I really like that you had two characters who were just adversaries. Like they both were skilled in their own way, both were human in their own way, and you don't see that a lot when it comes to certain films. Maybe because maybe with Hollywood actors and stuff, you know, maybe they want to give the guy who's most like Dwayne the Rock Johnson, want to give him a little bit more. You know, he can't play a weakling, so you got to give him, you know, gotta let him play off his strengths and whatnot, literally and you know, metaphorically. But I really did appreciate the fact that they were just equal adversaries. Like even with going back to The Departed, there is kind of a little bit of an imbalance, not fully to the extent of like a Dwayne the Rock Johnson and Kevin Hart type of movie, but I feel like he really did a good job at keeping it neutral. And also but with that being said, it makes it really hard to pick a favorite character. It makes it really, really hard. Like if you had to pick between Tequila and Alan, they're both equally fantastic and really well written characters. So with that being said, Savanna, is there anything you want to add on about this movie that you liked, didn't like, things it could improve, anything else?
Give me my rating. I give it a 9 out of 10 because I was just entertained the whole time.
Whoa,
like there was not one.
Whoa.
I think in action movies that's really important because it's an action. You have to be entertained. So I think this was go big or go home. That's how I would describe the movie.
I always forget to a big rating for you and a big factor for you is rewatchability, and this has high rewatchability. This is, you know, the movie you can recommend to someone movie night, whether you're just chilling or you just want to watch something because you're bored. This is definitely a very good all around movie. So I think it's safe to say that, James, you would probably give this 10 out of 10.
Oh, this is an all-timer for me. It means so much to me, and it's sort of been there for so long, and it's always great. You know, I've lost count of how many times I've seen it, but it is so rewatchable, and there are still, because there's a lot going on. I mean, as I said earlier, like even though the plot doesn't really matter, it's quite complicated, particularly in the first half. I remember we haven't mentioned the opening shootout in the tea house with all the bird cages, which is just amazing. It's one of my favorite sequences.
And
in
isn't
the film.
the guy at the tea house, isn't that John Woo? Isn't he one of like the workers in that scene?
John Woo is the guy he has the long, meaningful chats with in the jazz club.
Oh, okay. That's where it was.
So
I remember there was one scene I was like, is that John Woo? So, okay.
But the kind of assassin guy in the tea house who kills his partner and then he, you know, at point blank range shoots him in the head is Jun Kunimura, who's a big Japanese actor. He's now like in his 60s at least. But he shows up in a lot of stuff. I'm trying to think of something off the top of my head now that he's in recently. There was a Korean movie from a couple of years ago called The Wailing. I don't know if you saw that.
Mm-mm.
But he's kind of like the bag. Anyway, look him up, Jun Kunimura. He's been in a ton of stuff, and he's great.
Will do. As for my rating on this movie, I'm gonna give it a 8.2 out of 10. I'm going to give it 8.2 because I feel like it has great rewatchability. This is something, you know, compared to other films that we've, Savanna and I have talked about on the podcast. This is something I definitely feel like I'm going to be like, hey, like, you know, next week, if I want to show it to my mom, I'll sit down and watch it with her. If the other week after that, I want to sit down and show it to my boyfriend, I'll, you know, watch that with him fully. This is something where there's just so much. And I think also with this movie, I think what draws me in more is actually the choreography and how everything was done. This is something where I really, really, like, probably within this week, I'm going to be looking up how the scenes were done. I'm gonna because it just has a lot of great visuals and a lot of great, well done directing, choreographing, everything that I said. So this is something that I think is not only was entertaining in the moment, but learning about it will keep me entertained. So I'm gonna give it an 8.2 because of that.
Excellent. And what I will say is, if you liked this, definitely seek out Infernal Affairs if you haven't seen that, which, like I said, continues a lot of the themes and then was remade as The Departed. But also John Woo's The Killer from like a year or two before this, with Chow Yun-fat in it, which is amazing.
Okay, perfect. So Savanna, do you want to introduce 2046 to us now?
Yep. All right. So 2046 came out in 2004, and it's about several women enter a science fiction author's life over the course of a few years after the author has lost the woman he considers his one true love. It also stars Tony Leung, Zi Zhang, Fei Wong, and Gong Li. I'm just gonna say this is my favorite movie we've watched out of all Purple Moon.
Whoa, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I have a lot to say, but let's get James's view first.
Okay. Right, yeah. So this was I think this was the first Wong Kar-wai movie that came out after I moved to Hong Kong. And I had watched In the Mood for Love as part of my preparation for coming. And you can say that in part this is kind of a sequel to In the Mood for Love. Yeah. Nominally he's playing the same guy. And I mean, this is a film that obviously took many, many years to make, as many of Wong Kar-wai's films do. They are sort of films. He seems to make films that kind of just evolve into existence rather than having a rock solid script ahead of time and going with that. It also, just to keep it pandemically topical, the production took place during the 2003 SARS epidemic.
Wow.
I'm a survivor. It wasn't...
Two pandemics, an episode of a pandemic.
I know.
Holy crap. I've got
the matching cufflinks. It was not nearly as exciting as this one. It was as serious, but it was smaller, it was more contained, and it was harder to catch. And so it was not quite a big deal, but it did disrupt Hong Kong for about sort of 6 months in 2003.
Did you guys get swine flu as well, or was that just like
yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Three for three.
Well, we got swine flu, we got bird flu, but they didn't really impact daily life.
Gotcha.
SARS did. Things closed down. I remember I was a school teacher at the time. My first job in Hong Kong was as a school teacher, and that was weird. The kids had to wear masks and they had to get their temperatures checked on the way in and out every day, and it was a whole thing. But it was nothing like this. But I think it prepared Hong Kong. I think that's why Hong Kong has managed to handle COVID so well, is because we're like, we got this. We can do these. And this just happened to be a little bit more prolific. So anyway, that's one of the reasons why production took so long. And I know that originally it was supposed to be much more of a sci-fi movie, and it was supposed to be about sort of pairs of lovers, a bit more like if you've seen his film Ashes of Time.
Okay.
Which is about sort of wandering warriors in the desert, and they're all sort of they're all sort of talking about lost lovers, but then it's a Wong Kar-wai movie, so of course they are. And it was supposed to be a bit more of a sort of sci-fi movie about sort of warrior couples in the year 2046, and then as he was writing it, he sort of just wrote in Tony Leung's character, and then Tony Leung's character just became the focus of it, and he was like, okay, I've got these sci-fi bits of.
Yeah, I think reading that there was supposed to be like a hitman character at one point. Like it went through like several rewrites.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. It just does seem to be the way that he makes his movies. And as we've seen with the recent Criterion release of this film and 6 others, he okay, I'm going to say a bit like George Lucas, but bear in mind with me what I mean, because he's nothing like George Lucas, but he won't leave his work alone. And he'll keep going back and tinkering with them, and readjusting the color timing and re-editing them and all the rest of it. So they are constantly sort of evolving pieces of work, and even if you saw one 20 years ago, it's not necessarily going to be the same if you watch the newest version of it now. So I mean, for me, this film is a sort of it's almost like a sort of greatest hits package in a way. He's got a number of his favorite actors and actresses coming back in. Maggie Cheung pops up very briefly, but just sort of in the flashbacks. She's the one that got away. She's the lover from the previous movie that he can't get over. You got Faye Wong, who obviously was in Chungking Express.
Yes.
Not playing the same character, but she's in the Karina Lau, who in this is sort of Lulu, and she plays one of the robots, and is actually Tony Leung's wife.
Oh,
But I don't think they were yet married. But it's interesting. Okay, here's something that's quite funny: is that she's like the jealous character, the girl who's always, he bumps into her again and again, and she's always jealous. Well, so the story goes, is that whether or not Tony Leung and Maggie Cheung had a thing while they were doing In the Mood for Love, they have been sort of put together as this like perfect couple, and they're always sort of perceived to be this perfect on-screen couple. And apparently Karina Lau was really jealous for a really long time about them, whether anything happened or not. And so seeing her here essentially play the kind of the jealous lover is
Scandalous.
it's kind of funny. It's kind of funny that she sort of even agreed to do it.
Wong Kar-wai probably chuckled while writing that. Like,
well, who knows? Maybe he told her it was about another character, and then he the way he cut it. He was like, nope. So you've got all of these cast members who have been in stuff before. I mean, the big addition here is Zhang Ziyi, who was, she had done Crouching Tiger, she'd done Hero and House of Flying Daggers. She was really like the hottest star in this part of the world at that time, and for her to be working together with Wong Kar-wai was a big treat. And I think it's one of her best performances, to be honest. She's playing this very sort of complicated, difficult character, who's not the easiest to get along with, is very manipulative without saying anything. She's that classic girl who just expects the guy to know what she's thinking without ever saying what she's thinking. And for guys, it's very frustrating. Trust me. Very frustrating. Just tell me what you want. But anyway, digging up far too many memories. But I think in this she's great because you do sympathize with her, but you are frustrated by her. She's sort of gorgeous, but she's also tempestuous, and all of these things. And Tony Leung is not a nice guy either.
Oh,
a
player.
Well, yeah. I mean, you can kind of try and excuse him and just say, "Oh, he's damaged." He's lost his one true love, and he's looking.
Okay.
He's thoroughly, he's looking through every woman in town in order to find someone who gives him the same feelings that she. But he's not. He's going about it in a horrible way. He's a pretty terrible person.
He's a man whore. He's just a little fancy writer, a man whore. Ultimately,
you get the impression he's not a very good writer either. I think that's something that the film it never sort of overtly states, but you kind of get the thing. I mean, he's writing these very pulpy, what would today be comic books, essentially.
Yeah.
Not to say comic books are lesser or anything like that, but the work he's putting out, he was like, oh, I was in Singapore for a bit just writing columns for the paper, and now I'm here just doing this, and he sits there just dictating, and he's sick, and he's like, well, you just write the end of it, and, maybe even passing off some of Faye Wong's work as his own. You're not quite sure what's going on. So there's a lot going on, and I think it's, for me, I think ultimately it's a little bit less than the sum of its parts. I think what it does a great job of is creating sort of mood. It's beautiful to look at. You've got all of these actresses in one place. These are literally the best of the best. In terms of Chinese and Asian actresses, and the fact that they're all in a movie together is rare in and of itself, and they're all looking fantastic, and they're all being screwed over by Tony Leung in one way or another. So they all can share that experience, and they've all got that in common. But I felt for a lot of it, it's evoking different earlier films from his career, and you're like, oh yeah, that reminds me of In the Mood for Love, and I'd love to be watching that right now. Or when Faye Wong is like doing the thing that Faye Wong does in his movies, where she's often on her own and talking to herself, and her head's in the clouds, kind of thing. You're like, well, why aren't I watching Chungking Express right now? Or a lot of it's to do with sort of evokes Days of Being Wild as well, where they're all much younger and a bit more sort of aloof and what's the word I'm looking for? Nonchalant, disconnected emotionally to the world around them, rather than now where everybody's way too emotional, has been crippled by their emotions. But I think the one thing that overrides all of his films is this idea of memory. And everybody in one way or another is been hobbled physically or emotionally by their past, and by sort of that one true love that they had, and they will never get back. And I think how that ties into Hong Kong is, his sci-fi story is about getting to 2046 where you can forget about everything and start. It's like getting a clean slate. And obviously there is this notion that in 2047 Hong Kong will have a clean slate. But I think the message that he's saying to China or to whomever is, you're never going to be able to recapture what you had before. You have this idea that Hong Kong, the Chinese government have often talked about the British occupation of Hong Kong is this stain on their history, and that what they want to do is get that, wash away all of that and return it to its former glory. And I think what this film and many others like it are trying to say is that sort of before the British occupation of Hong Kong was just a little fishing town on the coast. There was no former glory. It is what it is because of everything that has happened. These characters are who they are because of everything that has happened to them. And if they keep looking back over their shoulder at what's past, they won't enjoy or appreciate the people around them, the opportunities around them, and they can't prepare for the future in any meaningful way. And I'm pretty sure that's what Wong Kar-wai is saying about Hong Kong and about China's relationship with Hong Kong. It's like, you've got to work together, and you've got to use everything that has come before you to move forward and create something better, build on what's come before, rather than try and wipe your memory, tear it all down, and restore some enigmatic former glory that was never. I mean, because that's the great thing. And I will stop talking in a moment.
You're good. You're good.
You're fine.
But that's the great thing, is because obviously because the relationship that he has idolized in his head was never a relationship.
Yeah.
His relationship in the Mood for Love, the whole point of that story is that they never do anything. Yeah. They're thrown together because their partners, they discover that their partners are having an affair. And they just kind of hang out, and they take the moral high ground the entire time. And they're like, we're never gonna do anything. And so he has sort of idolized this sort of perfect fictional relationship in his head, knowing that, and he's constantly undermined by his efforts to recapture it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think with this movie, although in terms of comparing it to, and I try not to look at it as a sequel because it is on its own. Like, it carries on its own. However, if you don't watch In the Mood for Love, the impact of certain scenes just won't land, especially when you have moments that go to black and white moments and kind of parallel scenes. Like, for example, there's a black and white moment in the beginning, and I kind of looked at it and I was like, why are we suddenly going to black and white? And then towards the end of the film, it goes to black and white with Mr. Chow and Miss Chang together. And just the way that this movie, it really is one of the best movies in terms of how to tell a story with many layers to it, and how to reveal a character who is in many different places at once within his head. This character, and it's just so great. Like, Mr. Chan is living both in the past and in the future simultaneously, and seems never to want to focus in on himself. And the way that he uses, I'm writing a science fiction novel that takes place down this road, and he's mimicking things here and there. It's kind of like he's playing God. And he's just going through and seeing, like, well, if that didn't work, let me just try to create a new world and see if everything would have worked. Seeing what I could have done differently, what these characters could have done differently, or, just having it play out and seeing if in a new world or in a new time it would play out any differently. I think that's where, and it's also best. Mr. Chan is one of the best in terms of writing characters that are a writer, the best depiction of a writer that I've personally ever seen within a movie, because of the way he, like, I really wrote in my notes here, the realest shit is when 200 hours of time passes and he hasn't written down anything, and you just see that little pen hovering over the page and everything, and he's just completely empty. I think it's brilliant. It and just the way that it's done. And also I put this in there because I thought I ended up having to take 2 days to watch this movie, because let me tell you, the minute it opened and it plays this beautiful song, I already told Savanna, because I was so happy that I figured it out. I had to pause it for 30 minutes because I recognized the song from another movie, and I could not watch the rest of the movie until I figured out. And so, my boyfriend's like, I don't know, like maybe it was something maybe you have it on a record, maybe. And I'm like, no, I know this movie. I know it. And immediately I was able, just some weird thing. I love soundtracks. I was like, this song is from Decalogue, Zbigniew Przesnia, episode 5, part 6. I was able to call out the song, and that was just like, as soon as it opened up with that, I was like, I'm going to enjoy this movie. Kind of like with the jazz. I'm very movie-oriented, or song-orientated. So the jazz that played in Hard Boiled, you got me in. You playing Zbigniew Przesnia, you got me in. It's all good. There's also another movie I really, really enjoy called Nocturnal Animals, which was another way that where it kind of has similarities in terms of, the way what was being told in real life versus what was actually going on in the book and stuff, how it paralleled, how it differed, things like that, how it was all the same story, but always in a different context or in a different time. That's one of the reasons why I love that movie. But even now, and I always thought Nocturnal Animals to be in my top 10 favorite movies of all time. This does it better in terms of that element of storytelling. It really, really hits it on the nail. So Savanna, I'm really, really curious, out of this movie, because you said it's the best movie that you think we've talked about so far, right?
It's definitely my favorite. Yes.
Oh, okay. Okay. So take me through why. I want to know why. I'm very curious.
I like the world that he kind of built. I think 2046 is kind of like where his memories lie, his lost love is missed opportunity. And the whole time he's staying in between reality and fantasy. I also really like all the women in this story. He picks women with a lot of problems, and all the actresses do such a great job. Especially Zhang, she is this master manipulator. She, he does not care. Every woman in the story, especially in the beginning with Lulu, he tore her whole life apart at the beginning for no reason, just because she was there. And then, you see Zhang, and she, he's basically like, yeah, come over when you want. And she's like, I don't need you. She's fine. And then 5 minutes later, she's a mess. I really like the complexity in all the women in the story, because it says a lot about what he's going through. All these women that he's picking are just messes. I like how the film is broken up. A lot of it is technically not in order, but he does it so beautifully and it makes sense. The color use in this film is astonishing. But my favorite part was the sub storyline with him and the landlord's daughter, where she couldn't be with the Japanese guy. By the way, that love letter made me swoon. I'm not one for like lovey-dovey stuff, but when she's reading that letter, I'm like, wow. But I really like their relationship, because throughout the whole movie, she's the only one he treats semi-well, if you notice. And he has a pretty good relationship with her. And I kind of saw that as like, oh, this is his like second chance. He's like living through her to get his second chance of love. He's helping her. So basically, I like how the film is constructed. I like all the relationship he has with women. In general, I'm a very character-oriented person when I look at films, especially like dramas. So I think he's such a complex character. I will say, I wasn't a huge fan of In the Mood for Love. I think we talked about it, you and me, Steph, how we thought it was just missing something.
It was, I think what I said was, it was top of the line for a romance film, but I'm not a huge fan of romance films. So it did kind of lack in terms of like vigor and in terms of emotion, at least my opinion.
So I think everything I felt like that was missing in that movie was put into this movie. So I really think it's a beautifully constructed movie, and I really like the characters. And I really like the ending of the film. So for me, it's just all of it is beautiful. The
So
music is fantastic as
Savannah,
well.
you message me when I'm watching the movie and you're like, oh my God, I cried at the end. And I got 15 minutes left on this movie. And I'm like, what is she talking about? I don't think I'm going to be crying or anything like that. It was the moment when
I told you.
it fades to black and then you just see the little white text that goes across. And it was like, and he never looked back. That's when I went, and I just trying to hold it in because I wasn't expecting it to be like that. But I think it's because it had that like definite, like, nope, no point of return. You were like, oh, that's tough.
But it's such a realistic ending for the path the character chose to go on.
Yeah.
Like he didn't choose to like, oh, I'm just gonna be by myself and do my little book. Like he chose a very self-destructive path to begin with. So I think the ending is very well done in that
Oh
regard.
yeah, I mean, it wouldn't have been satisfying if he had ended up with any one
No.
of those women. It
would have been
like,
justified.
Yeah.
yes, exactly. And you were like, and you just knew that this wasn't going to be a happy ending. You know, this would have just been okay, fine. I give it a week, and then you know you just know that it would have fallen apart. And of course, that's the great trick of all of the sort of damaged guy, is that if you only go for damaged women, then it's never your fault. When it doesn't work, you can just blame them. You know, and that's clearly just what he's doing. I mean, yeah, I liked the fact that there was a sort of a glimpse of redemption with how he interacts with Faye Wong's character, who's the daughter.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, the cynic would say, well, he doesn't want to get kicked out of his apartment, so he better not sort of do anything with her, because then to upset her dad. But there is definitely more than that, and I think that there's a sort of a glimmer of almost a sort of a paternal instinct, where he's like, well, maybe I know that I'm too far gone, and I can't jeopardize getting involved with her. So what I can do is get one over on her dad by helping him out, helping her out. Maybe.
Yeah.
I think that that I don't think he's entirely selfless in the way that he does it. But whatever his motivations, he does the right thing in that in that particular instance.
For sure.
I wondered if you listen to if you let the end credits run, then over the end credits, I almost missed it, and I can't remember if I had noticed it before. But I got up and I was walking around and I was just letting it run because of the music. And then you get all these snippets of the news, and you've got like Thatcher talking, and then you've got
I saw.
I didn't see.
the coverage of the handover ceremony. And so it's worth just checking out and just listening to it, because it gives a very sort of potted history of what was what was going on with the Hong Kong handover. And it also nails down any ambiguity there may have been about, is this what it's about or not? It's like, this is what it's about.
Well, I also wonder, does it allude to maybe the fact that, like, in the end, when the credit is going, is it kind of like a hint, like saying, like, no, there is hope for this character. There is some type of hope. I wonder.
I think that's what's good about how ambiguous it leaves it is that, we all have the potential.
Yeah.
To improve and to do better, and I think that that's what it ties in with Wong's bigger message of you've just got to keep moving forward.
Yeah,
you've just got to keep going and eyes front, and not let go of the past. You don't need to forget about it. You don't need to wipe it away. Don't destroy the past. And again, I think that ties in with China, the way that China can often eradicate parts of its history. Look at the whole Cultural Revolution was all about just destroying everything that had come before it.
Yeah.
And he's saying that that's not where your focus and energies should lie. It's just in making sure that your next decision is a better one.
So, James, I wanted to ask you, out of all the different relationship that this character has with the females, which one, in terms of, because I feel like they're different arcs, they're different chapters of this man's life, which chapter, rather, or which relationship did you feel like was the best shown? Because I personally have a favorite relationship between Mr. Chan and the Black Spider. That was my favorite.
Okay. The other Su Li Shen, who has the same name as his ex.
Yeah.
I think I like the relationship with Zhang Ziyi best. I mean, yes, that's sort of the one that's given most attention and all the rest of it. But I just love her in this movie so much. I think her performance is fantastic. I, you know, not condoning his behavior anyway, but I like how terrible he is to her. I mean, in terms of just the story and the drama and the interaction, you know, the way that they're just sort of playing. What it shows is how out of depth she is, out of her depth she is, because she's so used to like playing with these men, you know, and wrapping them all around her finger, and then she meets him, and he's so much better at this game than she is, and just sort of destroys her, you know, without. I don't think he even really means to or wants to. I just don't think that he anticipated or could then deal with her falling for him as much as she did.
Yeah, they're kind of like teases, but they're really low blow teases. Like, especially when it comes with like them and the topic of money. Like, he definitely uses that. Like, there's one scene, I think, where he like asks her, like, hey, like, how much do I pay you for the sex? And it's just like she's just like, I'm sorry, were we just not in a relationship? What's going on? Like, I really think that that was great. I really liked also how that kind of kept reoccurring, especially in the end when they go to dinner together and stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, and she hands over the cash, and you realize that's his money.
Yeah.
That she's been saving up the whole time, and she's just giving back all the money that he's been investing in. So it's such a power move at the end. She's just ultimately like, here you go. This is what you have meant to me, and I'm giving it all back. It's a nice touch.
I think the reason why I really like Mr. Chan's relationship with the Black Spider is not only because now at the end it kind of feels like, even though like with what we were saying with Bai, I think is how you pronounce her first name, with the character Bai, it was kind of an unfair game. He was clearly like a whole nother level. She was just this very not innocent, but she was new to the game. Now all of a sudden we have the Black Spider, and it's like he is matched and he's face to face with death. Yeah. But also I feel like in terms of out of all his relationships, he sees, and not only with the coincidence of that they both have the same exact name, but also the way their scene plays out. They're eating dinner together, like how they would in The Mood for Love. They're in front, and I think it's the same restaurant, because when they go outside, you see the same exact setting and everything. I really think it was such a great way for, you know, the director to really just go to this character and be like, you see this? This is a mirror. Look what you're doing. Like, I really think it was such a great way to show that. And I just really enjoyed it, like, and how it all tied in at the end. And I understand why it could be more seem to be a love letter to In the Mood for Love rather than a direct sequel, where it kind of pays homage to it, but we're not deriving from the same chronological pathway. We're going off at like I think like an anthology type of pathway. But I really loved how at the end it was just like, yep, you're going to feel like you're watching In the Mood for Love again, and you have like the same setting and everything. I really appreciated that.
Yeah. I just like this constant battle of like trying to preserve whatever love he had and also trying to forget about it. Like there always seemed like there was this struggle in the movie where he's just like, okay, like I'm going to be with this person, but then I'm going to go home and like write in my book and my missed opportunities. So I really like that there's this internal struggle of the character, and he just decides to just deal with it in a really toxic way.
And he's so self-destructive. And and you kind of realize at the end, he knew what he was doing all along. He knew. And like where the fact where he said, like when he's leaving the Black Widow and stuff, and he says like, I said it out loud, but it wasn't meant to her. It was meant to me. Like, I have to work on myself. And I was like, oh, I love intrinsic male characters. You don't see them too often. So I was like, yes, I really love that it had that approach to it. And really, it's just like, you're not dealing with some, you know, dumb fart who's just like, oh, I like this girl. I like this girl. Let's just keep it going. No, we're dealing with a man who's self-sabotaging his life because he probably feels resentment towards himself, because he feels guilty that he really let his life become this way. So that was just chef's kiss. Let me see. So I have a question for you, James. So this came out in 2004. And I literally wrote down, where in the world is Wong Kar-wai? Because after this movie, it just seems like didn't hear a lot from this director anymore, or at least in terms of US consumption.
Right now, if I am correct, I think after this, he tried to move to the US. He made one Hollywood movie with Jude Law and Nora Jones
Oh,
called
okay.
um,
Nora Jones.
My Blueberry Not. Yeah, yeah. The
Wow.
Yeah, he did this anthology. There was like a 3-part anthology movie called Eros, which was him and Steven Soderbergh and Michelangelo Antonioni, and I think it was like the last thing Antonioni did before he died. And I think his bit, is in the new Criterion box set.
I think you're right. I think you're right.
It's called
in
The
there.
Hand, I think, and that's in there. And then he did this Hollywood movie, My Blueberry Nights, which isn't great. It doesn't translate. His style doesn't really translate to a sort of traditional American movie. I've only seen it once, and I don't remember a great deal about it. But it's not considered particularly good. And then after that, he decided with Tony Leung to make an Ip Man martial arts movie. Which just took years and years and years and years. Tony Leung had to go and train in Wing Chun Kung Fu for 5 years.
Holy crap.
In the meantime, around the time that My Blueberry Nights came out, Donnie Yen brought out his Ip Man movie called Ip Man, which became sort of a sort of blockbuster franchise, which were far more grounded, realistic, well, not realistic, but that's like more traditional, just action movies, or albeit period action movies, and there's now 4 of those. There were other rival Ip Man projects, but they just kept going with theirs, and so Wong Kar-wai teamed up with Yuen Woo-ping, the martial arts choreographer, who is probably most famous for coming to Hollywood and doing The Matrix and Kill Bill. So he does all the very sort of elaborate wire work, sort of flying techniques and what have you. He's a director as well in his own right, and he actually directed one of the Donnie Yen Ip Man movies, I think the 3rd one. Anyway, he's arguably the greatest sort of fight choreographer in the world. And so those 3, so Wong Kar-wai, Tony Leung, and Yuen Woo-ping teamed up for this martial arts epic. It's like a massive sprawling biopic about Ip Man, and it eventually came out in like 2013. I think around 2013.
Yeah, and I'm looking, it doesn't seem like he's done anything. Do you know if he's like working? Because like you said, his works kind of take a few years. So do you think that there's been something in the woodwork?
Almost certainly there is something. There is 1 or 2 things that he produced. I don't think there's anything coming anytime soon. Not that I'm aware of. But I think he's always sort of got his name attached to something. I think something popped up on a government list somewhere last year, because all projects being made in China have to be kind of registered with the government ahead of time, and at every step of the way they have to be kind of vetoed. And I think something popped up last year on a list that had his name attached as the director, but I don't think we've heard anything more about that.
Ooh, okay.
Since. But then, yeah, he does take his time. And that's sometimes a good thing, sometimes not.
I mean, yeah, just let alone with In the Mood for Love and 2046, yeah, it definitely pays off, especially with just like in terms of even like modern cinema. No one does it like him. He uses a lot of more vintage inspirations and stuff like that. But in terms of how he's doing it, at least looking at the work of 2046, like I can't compare it to another movie except In the Mood for Love. I can't compare how it's done, the style of it, how it looks and everything. It really is like his style is very like one of its own. Like he's very unique when it comes to that. And I think also that's something that takes time, especially with these beautiful scenes and the coloring and everything. And, even the set design and, just trying to figure out, okay, costume, set design, while also being, futuristic, but from futuristic in the mind of someone who's living in the 60s, like going that additional step and everything, I think is just, I can see it definitely taking a long time. And I was thoroughly surprised to find out that there was no Oscar nomination for like set design or even
Mm.
costumes. I was really, really surprised that it didn't get any nominations for that because it really is. It's almost like the 60s style that they have for In the Mood for Love and in this movie really just perfect. Almost it reminds me of like Mad Men, but I think it even does even more. Like it really I do you know if he films on film or does he do digital?
I think I think it is film. I mean, because he worked for a long time with Christopher Doyle, the
Yeah.
cinematographer. He's a very sort of famous Australian cinematographer who I think still lives here in Hong Kong and has been around for years and years and years. Who shoots a lot of stuff, and he shoots a lot of stuff in Hollywood as well. But I think Christopher Doyle would only ever shoot on film. But I think their relationship has soured, or they're taking a break, or
Gotcha.
whatever. But I think this film, 2046, was certainly shot on film. I mean, because digital wasn't really used sort of in the mainstream until about 10 years ago, until
Hmm.
about 2010, 2009, 2010, when they wanted everybody, when they wanted all the cinemas to go digital. And so they made everything 3D for 2 years, just so that everybody would change their cinemas to a digital cinema. So I think I can't remember if the Grandmaster was shot digitally actually, but as that's the last film he did, who knows what he's working on now?
Yeah.
It would depend on his
Yeah.
DP, I think.
Yeah, because I was
Um,
watching because I have the Criterion Blu-ray and I
mm,
lost my Blu-ray remote, so I had to watch it on Amazon. And I was surprised, like the quality difference. Like, yeah, and I know like Criterion they remaster and stuff like that, but in order to do like that level of remastering, you have to have it on film. You can't take digital and you can't keep building up to the quality as
mm,
if you could take film and digitize it and make it even like it just if you're gonna re-enhance, you always want to re-enhance film. It's just looks so much easier on the eyes and it overall just has an even better effect on it. So I was really like when I was watching it on Amazon, I was like, was this shot on film? Because the Amazon one didn't look like, the refurbished, the all polished up cut and
Right.
everything like that.
it's
So I was
probably a
genuinely curious.
compressed. It's probably a compressed, much smaller file of the film as well.
That's true.
On your Blu-ray, you'll have you know a nice big file of it, and Amazon needs to stream it to so many millions of homes simultaneously. So it's
Very,
probably
very
been
true.
compressed a little bit.
Mhm.
Not that I'm the biggest expert on these sort of technical things, but I think that's probably got partly to do it as well.
Gotcha. So with that being said, I think we can start rating it unless Savannah or James, do you want to add any more comments about the movie? Talk about anything more facets about it?
I don't think so.
Okay, so then I'll start with you, James. So James, what is your rating out of 10 for this movie?
I'm gonna give this about a 7,
Wrong.
because
I'm just kidding.
just hang up on me. No, yeah.
Stephanie, end the call.
I I went back because this was one of the first movies that came out after I sort of started writing professionally, and I actually was able to go and look up my old review of it back from back in like 2005 or whatever, and it was terrible. But I was interested how what I thought of it, and I think my thoughts on it are pretty much the same. I think that the performances are fantastic, and I love Tony Leung's character. I love Zhang Ziyi's character. I feel that I feel what it does a great job at sort of evoking the films that have come before it. I mean, I'm not saying specifically like this character is from this film or what have
Hmm.
you, but I think that what it does more effectively than anything else is just remind me of other films of his that I like more.
Okay.
And I can't deny that that was still true watching it again this time.
Yeah, that
So
makes
that's
sense.
yeah, so that's why I'm going to give it a 7. The performances are great, production design's great, it looks great, but at the end, I don't think it stands alone as confidently
Yeah,
as some of his other films do.
gotcha. Savannah?
I'm gonna give it a 9 out of 10.
Nine.
I really cared for
Nice.
every character in this film. I really liked how whenever we wanted to get some authentic feeling from the main character. We have to kind of go into his novel and see how he's actually feeling. And I really liked every single character. I cared about what was going on. I cared about all the actresses. And all in all, I really liked how the story is drawn out. It's not always in order, but it always makes sense. So, and I'm a big sucker for forbidden romances. So that also adds into it. So, and the reason it's a 9 out of 10 is just because I can't probably watch this movie more than twice a year. Just because I don't see myself just like, oh, I'm in the mood for 2046 every weekend.
Yeah.
But yeah, I will. I'm definitely gonna buy that set now just for this movie.
Wow, just for okay. Well, I think you could buy it for other.
Well, in the
you could
mood
probably
for
get a better
love,
deal if you're gonna just buy it off of Amazon or something.
This was like the driving
drive,
point.
the
Yes.
drive to make that
My motivation.
I feel kind of bad because
purchase.
I feel bad. I picked up this set actually after talking to you guys a couple of weeks ago about we're going to do this. It had just come out and I was like, okay, fine, I'll just go get it. And I feel bad because since owning it, the only one I've watched now is 2046, which ranks among my least favorite of his films. I would say.
Gotcha.
But so I'm like, well, I guess the only way is up from
the
here.
others.
So yeah.
Yeah, that's how I felt. Because when I was deciding, I was like, ooh, because I really want to see Fallen Angels. That one has been like calling out to me, and I really want to see that. But I got the set. Very happy I have the set. But in terms of my rating of this movie, I'm at a crossroads because part of me feels like I do think that this is one of the best directing in terms of the way the story is told, and also very, very good writing. But the way it's told and how we see it switch from character to character and things like that, and from, past, present, and future, I think it's fantastic. However, I feel like this movie does have a hindrance to it and a weight of it. And that is I just don't see you being able to appreciate this movie without being able to appreciate In the Mood for Love. I think it's kind of like...
I agree with that.
And it's also like weird because it's in that gray area of like, is it a love letter? Is it a sequel? Is it an anthology? And I do feel like it's kind of like, the ball and chain on this movie where you're not just going to be able, like, I wouldn't be able to recommend this. And I started watching the movie with my boyfriend and I told him, I'm like, honestly, I'm happy you didn't get to finish it because I don't think you would have liked it without knowing what In the Mood for Love was, without being introduced to that. So that I feel like is kind of a hindrance. And I'm also at a little bit of a loss. Like when I recognize what I like about this movie, it's all the good that I liked about In the Mood for Love. But I think I gave In the Mood for a Love for a 7. But I don't think it's better. I don't know. Yeah.
You don't think it's better?
I don't know. In some ways it is in terms of the way the story is told and stuff like that. But In the Mood for Love, I think it's because you had like that urge. You had that like, oh, I want them to be together. Whereas here you're like, no, homies, go back in 2046 and just go take a nap. Like it was a really, really big difference of emotion for me. Both are equal emotions that you can have towards movies, but I don't know. So I'll
remind you, we came to a conclusion together that nothing really happened in the Mood for Love. That was always our thing. Like, okay, we wish more would have happened. So I'm not trying to influence your scoring right now, but I am saying that it's important that we remember, our previous
Consistency.
Yes.
Yeah. Because I really did write while watching it. I wrote like, it doesn't have the same vigor as In the Mood for Love. And now I'm looking back and I'm like, Stephanie, where was your mind during that? Like, where were you during that sentence? I don't know. It's tough.
There is an argument to be made though that your initial knee-jerk reactions to a film aren't necessarily the right ones. This whole idea these days, I'm going to sound like an old man again, but about like hot takes, and stepping out of the cinema and being the first person to like share your opinion of it. It's great, it's a good game, but is somewhat detrimental. A lot can be said for just waiting a day, a week, or whatever, and seeing how films do kind of just percolate what stays there, what dissipates, what clings to your memory. Because, they can mature in time. And it sounds like In the Mood for Love has done that. a little bit.
I think it has, because I think, and it's from not so much as the story portion of it, it's from the filming aspect of it. Like when I
Okay.
think about it, I'm like, oh, it's so pretty. Like I just like look back and I think of that. I don't necessarily think of the plot when I think of In the Mood for Love. It's kind of like when you think of, I don't know how you felt about this one, James, Midsummer. When I think about Midsummer, I'm like, that was a pretty film, but I thought the plot was trash. But I still think like, oh, maybe I want to see it because it was really, really pretty. But I do think it
Okay,
was
that
more than.
that makes sense.
Do you see where I'm coming from?
Yeah,
Like
that
I think
makes
of it
sense.
like, wow, it was really like well done. And like even though it does, I still agree with that comment of it really doesn't go nowhere. The moments where it's like the violin
There's
theme
like a
plays
lot
and they're
of
like looking at each other and
yeah.
stuff. It's like, ooh, like though it has moments in it of itself that are just like, ooh, but as a whole, it doesn't come as good together as
But there was a lot of
2046.
beauty in the subtlety of In the Mood for Love,
Yes.
where this movie's a little bit more in your face about everything. So I understand where like
Hmm.
I understand the appreciation for In the Mood for Love now, besides the plot. I
Yeah.
see what you're saying.
Because it's like
I mean, I think
I
you can
like the
actually.
filming style of In the Mood for Love, but the way the story is told better. But I'm still not 100% sold on the full plot on either. But what were you gonna say, James?
I was just going to say, I think you can actually, from that, draw a few parallels, sort of not very obvious ones, but parallels between the two films that we've talked about today, and how Hong Kong filmmakers might sort of prioritize certain aspects of the process. That in
Yeah.
neither film is narrative the most important thing, and over in Hollywood particularly, you'll always hear story, story, story. It has to be story.
Yeah,
Whereas I think in both of these films, with both of these filmmakers, the visual storytelling is far more important. The characters, not necessarily their narrative arc, but just their
Yeah.
internalization, their emotions, what drives them, what haunts them. More importantly, is what drives the story forward. Really, just how these characters are dealing with their place in the world and what they have done and the guilt and the grief and all the rest of it. And then at the same time, in their own way, I think John Woo and Wong Kar-wai just want to dazzle the audience with visual explosions of color and light and dissolves and freeze frames and slow mo. The tools being used, I think, are actually quite similar a lot of the
yeah.
time.
Like it really does feel like when I think of these two movies, I really wish I could look at it as one, because then I could think like, oh yeah, because the directing is continuously good. But half I could look at it as like halfway through the plot gets going and I'm starting like the storytelling mode more and stuff like that. So if I were to review 2046 separately, I would give it an 8. If I were to review both together as like a double feature, like back to back, probably a 7.5, because 2046 would pull it back. But once again, oh, I'm sorry, not 2046. In the Mood for Love kind of pulls that score back a little bit because of that empty plot, but it was worth going through that for 2046. So I'll leave it at that complexity.
No, that makes sense. That makes sense. I mean, I just want to go back on one
That's
thing
good.
that
Mhm.
I thought of and then forgot about and then wanted to just bring it up quickly. Is
Yeah.
that when you said that a Wong Kar-wai movie doesn't remind you of anything other than another Wong Kar-wai movie. There is no other filmmaker out there like him, and I think that's absolutely true. I think that's a very sort of smart point. I think unlike John Woo and many other
Yes.
filmmakers, he didn't really influence certainly the local industry. There aren't really Hong Kong filmmaking isn't now full of Wong Kar-wai imitators
Yeah.
because no one can do it, but a lot of that is because his films are deemed sort of financially unsuccessful a lot of the time.
Yeah.
European and Western audience, art house crowds love it. In Hong Kong, they don't, even with these great casts, they don't do all that well at the box office. But I think I was trying to think of where can you see the influence of Wong Kar-wai? And I think the most obvious example in recent years is Moonlight. I think there's actually,
Oh,
I think there's
that's
actually, I think Barry Jenkins actually or somebody made a video. There's one of these video critics, and it's called like Every Frame's a Painting or Every Frame's a Picture or something
Heard of
like that.
them.
There might be one of them, but Barry Jenkins has been very vocal about the influence of Wong Kar-wai on his work. And if you look at the way that Moonlight is shot and edited and how it evokes your emotions through its visuals and what have you. It's owes a huge debt to the films of Wong Kar-wai.
Gotcha. Because I was gonna say the only thing,
see that.
like, I think one thing that I think is also really unique is that the only person who's taken, well, besides from Barry Jenkins, as you said, because with a movie like this, you would think there would be more copycats. But it seems like the only person who's took inspiration from Wong Kar-wai is Wong Kar-wai himself, looking back at In the Mood for Love and going, man, I want to visit that old song and dance again, and just throw in Tony Leung back into, you know, the movie again, reprising the same character.
You know who else does that? Kind of takes inspiration from himself, right?
Probably every major film director out there, but who?
Well, Lars von Trier, our best friend.
My bestie.
I just remember the house that Jack built. He does that specifically in that movie. He recalls a lot of his films. Now, I don't know if that's just him having a massive ego and just
Probably.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
You know, look
Probably.
what I did. But that he did come to mind when you said like taking inspiration from himself. I know he's a big one when it comes to that.
I thought you were going to say maybe like a Tarantino, because it's like certain elements are reoccurring, but this one is literally going back and looking at like a full length and going, I'm actually going to take some of that and use, and not like recycle, but more so upcycle, like take it and I'm going to make it into something new. Because I feel like a lot of, even today, like with Barry Jenkins and Moonlight, he could look at a movie like 2046 or In the Mood for Love and go, I'm going to take elements, but make it my own. Whereas he literally just upcycled his own stuff again, but made it into something new. And I think also maybe for some reason I'm thinking, I can't remember the director's name. The only other person I could think of in terms of visually that looks like Wong Kar-wai, but is still not close and it's still not as good, is the director of Drive. He did another
Nicholas Winding Refn.
Yes, he did another movie with Ryan Gosling where Only God Forgives, where it had similar color palette and things like that. But
that movie was weird. I remember,
but
strange.
But it didn't pay homage to this. It was similar, but like I've never seen something that's been like Wong Kar-wai, or at least anything that I can like recollect. You see a lot of Tarantino knockoffs. You see a lot of Scorsese knockoffs, and definitely a lot of like superhero, and especially with action films, you know, every action movie is, you know, very, very similar today. At least most of them are. So I think it's so interesting that no one's really tried to touch Wong Kar-wai's stuff in terms of, you know, film and everything. But maybe just because it's a daunting task. I mean, it takes the dude 5 years to come up with these beautifully constructed movies. Probably many people just would rather either take from an easy movie, an easy Hollywood blockbuster, or just be original.
And it gets very expensive making the movies the way that Wong Kar-wai does. Very few people would be able to convince their financiers to put up with them for that long. So
absolutely. Oh yeah, and having like, especially if whatever he's working on now is supposedly going to take, you know, almost 10 years to make. Probably. Man, I can't imagine how much that budget's going to be when they finally announce everything. It's probably going to be like some crazy dynasty film where it's going to be like $100 million. I don't know if they're going to give him that much, but very, very crazy.
I mean, I wish I had more information about what he's up to right now. And that's not to say that he spent 10 years on the one project. You know, there's maybe stuff that's fallen through and he's got to start again, or he's trying to do different things. Okay, according to IMDb, there are 2 TV shows that he's involved in at the moment. There's one called Blossoms, which is only rumored but is in pre-production, and then he has announced something called Tong Wars, which is obviously Tongs is like triads, like gangsters. So Gangster Wars, but those are both TV shows, so that'll be in China.
Interesting. Ooh, I hope those come out soon.
Oh, actually, Tong Wars is set in turn-of-the-century Chinatown in San Francisco.
Oh, cool.
So that could even be an English language project, or a bit of both.
Probably split. I would imagine it would be split. I feel like he would want to bring in a bunch of like actors he's worked with in the past.
That's for Amazon. So there you go. They've got money.
Well, that's why. Okay, that makes sense. Because I've noticed that they started carrying a lot more Wong Kar-wai films, Amazon, compared to all the other
Yeah.
streaming services. That makes, ha 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 ha, that makes a lot of sense. But this has been a lot of fun. Thank you so much, James, for coming on here and talking about both movies with us. We really had a great time. I just enjoy whenever I feel like it's always like our next best episode whenever we have, even though you're only our second guest, I'm saying this pretty prematurely, but it's been so much fun being able to converse with you and also really get like your opinion since you literally live in the realm of this kind of industry
Yeah.
in
Right.
terms of movies. So is there any handles, websites, anything you want to plug? Where can we find you?
Sure. Well, firstly, thank you very much. It's been an absolute delight chatting to you guys, both of you. I love what you're doing.
Thank
You
you.
know, and if there is any way that I can kind of just help you continue, encourage you, continue what you're doing, I shall. Please do so because you're onto a winner. You've got fascinating sort of perspectives and opinions on
Thank you.
everything. And it's very refreshing, and it's what our industry needs. Is all of these
Sir,
sort of
I'm wearing mascara. Don't do this to me. Whew.
But no, it's fresh, new voices like yourselves with different perspectives to my own. I'm just another boring
We're
old
gonna
white
quote
guy
this
droning
all
on.
in
So.
our Twitter bio. That's it. All this will be
Well,
quoted.
You're very, very welcome. You know, it's been great, and I hope one day we can do it again.
Yes.
If I'm not
absolutely.
outstaying my welcome, that would be great.
Anytime.
In the
You just
meantime,
tell us the movie you're like, I want to talk with you guys about this. Shoot me an email, shoot me a message, shoot her a text, shoot her an email,
Yeah.
call, Zoom. I don't care. You are always welcome on our little show, sir. So thank you so much.
that's
But
wonderful.
so you have I think
Yeah.
you have a pretty clever website.
Well,
Marshatax?
yeah, I have my blog, which is essentially just sort of an archive of where all my reviews are. I put them all in one place, but I haven't actually updated it in about a year. I think it was around the Oscars last year, but it is marshatax.com, which is it's a domain name I thought of a long time before I had anything to use it for, and I just grabbed it and I kept paying for it every year. And I was
Nice.
like, yes, one day I will use this for something. I probably use Twitter more than anything else, so I'm on there at Marshy00, MARSHY00. I'm on Facebook. You can add me on Facebook at James Marsh, and you can find my reviews actually on Rotten Tomatoes or Tomatoes, should I say? Yeah.
And what's your letterbox handle?
Oh, it's Marshy00. If in doubt, everything is Marshy00. So yes, I'm on Letterboxd all the time. I keep a very robust diary of all my stuff, and links to all my
He's
reviews
on
are on
top of
there.
it too. He's like I literally went on Letterboxd today, and I already saw that you like had clicked that you rewatched the two
I did.
movies and stuff. I was like, man, this guy's on top of it.
I cleared my schedule. I had my vaccine first thing in the morning, and I was like, I'm not going to be up to much tomorrow, but I can watch these movies again. So I just sat on my sofa rewatching Hong Kong movies yesterday. So
What
that
a
was
guy.
a pleasure.
What a guy. So
Thank you very
the
much.
next time we will be Savannah and I are for our next episode, we're actually going to be disgusting. Oh my God, I'm getting sleepy. The caffeine is starting to crash. We're going to be discussing 71 fragments of a chronology of chance. So that should be a different tone. And it should be interesting and a little bit irrelevant for the times of the United States.
Ooh.
So we'll be a little saucy little exit. But thank you everyone so much for listening, and tune in next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.